that there are limits based upon confidentiality. Please share your roles and involvement with the Title IV cases of Michigan, Virginia, Wyoming, and then your own Title IV case.
Certainly. Well, each of these has a different character to it. So I'll start with the first one you mentioned. The dioceses of Eastern Michigan and Western Michigan, which are now known as together as one diocese, the Diocese of the Great Lakes. I was involved with two different Title IV matters in the Diocese of Eastern and Western Michigan. The first was with Bishop Wayne Hoagland, who was the Bishop Diocesan for Western Michigan and Bishop Provisional for Eastern Michigan, holding those roles simultaneously. At the time that I was involved with that, I was the intake officer for Title IV matters involving bishops. A report came to me that Bishop Hoagland had been involved in an extramarital affair, and my role was to reach out to him and to assess his response and gather information, and then work as the intake officer to prepare a report that summarized the basic information about the case and to work with that process with the presiding bishop and the president of the disciplinary board for bishops. I called Bishop Hoagland after consultation with the others on the team, the reference panel, the presiding bishop, the chair of the disciplinary board, and the intake officer, reached out to Bishop Hoagland. And because I'd known him for a number of years and worked with him in the diocese in Michigan, he recognized that it was me calling, and his immediate response was that he had made a mistake. I did not even have to say what it was that was on my mind. He knew what I was calling for. So in that matter, while it was very tragic and very complicated, and many people across two dioceses, as well as families affected by it, we had complete cooperation with Bishop Hoagland in sharing everything that he had been involved in this inappropriate relationship. And my role, beyond the intake officer role, was also to wear that pastoral hat. At the time, I was wearing at least two hats on the presiding bishop's staff. One was pastoral support for those involved in Title IV, all those around and affected by it, as well as being a member of the reference panel as the intake officer. Roles that can be in conflict. I shouldn't say can be in conflict, but are readily and very quickly in conflict with one another, because you have a regulatory, judicial kind of role, and you have a pastoral role to all of those within the system. It's a complexity that the church had struggled with for a number of years and had never fully resolved. It has since been resolved that the roles have been separated. So in the role that I'm leaving on the presiding bishop's staff, I've been wearing, among some other non-Title IV hats, pastoral support role for bishops, for those who've made complaints, all those around affected by it, and certainly the people within the diocese. That was a real conflict, both internally and in terms of function in those two dioceses. The next one, the Diocese of Virginia, I believe what we're referring to there are the concerns that were brought to my attention by Mr. Eric Benetti, a layperson in the Diocese of Virginia, who's also now the author and publisher of a website called Anglican Watch. And he has had numerous things to say about me in my role, much of which is inaccurate and serves his own particular purposes in Title IV. But basically, what happened in the Virginia case is that Mr. Benetti had a a complaint about behavior of the rector of the congregation that he attended. Mr. Benetti had been a member of the vestry, and he was removed by the rector as a member of the vestry. He filed Title IV charges against the rector. Those went through the Diocese of Virginia Title IV process. There was no jurisdiction on the part of the presiding bishop's office, nor any role for the Title IV intake officer for bishops. It went through that process. His complaint was dismissed, and he was not satisfied with the result. Not an uncommon situation in Title IV. When we get to Title IV cases, people have been hurt, and people are rarely going to be satisfied or fully satisfied with the outcome of those. So rather than continue through the diocesan process of appeal and or to accept the results of those appeals, he decided to file, he wanted to place a concern about the Bishop of Virginia. And so that came to me. At the time, in my role as intake officer, I was working in concert with presiding Bishop Michael Curry, who really wanted Title IV as much as possible to be handled in a pastoral way rather than to be handled in purely a judicial way. Whether that was right or wrong at that time, it was what Bishop Curry wanted, and it certainly was consistent with my feelings about Title IV, that most matters can be handled in a pastoral way. So my work was to try to get Mr. Benet to recognize that his concerns were really with the Diocese of Virginia and their process, not something that needed to be handled through the Title IV process with bishops. He did not accept that, and thus began a series of ongoing complaints, blog posts, pieces placed on AnglicanWatch.com that called my integrity into question, along with multiple other bishops and others who were in his sights. That was a painful situation, of course, for him, for people in the diocese, and it drew me and drew the presiding bishop into those matters as well. Those have been resolved through the Title IV process, and ultimately no charges were made against me or the presiding bishop in that matter. The next that's probably some have read about on Anglican Watch or in other media within the Episcopal Church and beyond is a matter in Michigan. So we'll go back there to Bishop Prince Singh. Bishop Singh was the bishop provisional for Western Michigan and Eastern Michigan following Bishop Hoagland. His ministry went along quite well for a number of months. He's well known as a healer, a reconciler, one who seeks peace, who reaches across bridges or reaches across gulfs to bridge those gaps between people and relationships. Before he became the bishop provisional, he also underwent a difficult time in his own family. He and his wife divorced. They have 2 adult children. And my knowledge was that they had reached an amicable divorce, amicable, but yes, always painful. There was no indication of any kind of inappropriate behaviors within the marriage or in his time as bishop or in his time as a parent to his 2 adult sons. Later, as Bishop Singh, who was divorced and had been divorced for some time, when he revealed to his sons that he was entering into a new relationship, that created a period of unsettledness within the family. That came to me and to presiding Bishop Curry as a concern about his behavior. And it, for the first time, identifications of his behavior as having been physically and emotionally abusive within the home. Also, some accusations about alcoholism, which behavior that can result from alcoholism can be a Title IV matter. But alcoholism itself is an illness and something to be treated medically and to be treated pastorally. My assessment and Bishop Curry's assessment at the time that the complaints came in was that this was a family matter, that what we were seeing was the unsettledness within the family, ongoing hurt that the sons were feeling because their father was moving on with a new relationship in his life. And we saw it as something that needed to be dealt with internally, pastorally, and therapeutically. And my role could be to support their work in seeking that kind of healing within the family. Bishop Curry made a promise to Bishop Singh's former spouse, Roja, that I would reach out to her and to the boys to provide some pastoral care and to follow up on what their needs might be. In the midst of this, there began to be a number of accusations flying back and forth, and things escalated within the family. And I determined, based on my pastoral experience and my previous experience as a therapist, that to intervene in an internal family matter that needed to be dealt with within the family would actually exacerbate the problem and create some triangulation and do nothing to really help resolve the internal family matters that they had. As time went on, it became apparent that trying to handle this pastorally and trying to um, deal with it as an internal family matter was not was not acceptable to the Singh family. And so Title IV charges were filed against me and against Bishop Curry for failure to respond appropriately, pastorally, and to follow a very narrow reading of the intake officer's role to always write a report. I would contend that, and will and continue to contend, that the intake officer must have pastoral discretion to deal with these matters early on. In a pastoral matter, or go straight to the report in a judicial handling. We live in a time where conflict is high. The need for healing and reconciliation has increased, and tolerance for handling things in a pastoral way is much lessened than they were in the past. One of the learnings I've had in this is that still you need to try the pastoral approach, but if that is not getting traction or success early on, inevitably you'll need to go to the more judicial approach so that you can help keep the conflict lower and respond to what the multiple and different expectations there are around the church. That matter has been resolved against Bishop Curry and me. I have undertaken and completed just this last week some continuing education in Title IV and in the role of an intake officer, and I found it to be very helpful. There were reminders of things that I knew. There were highlights about some of the new aspects of Title IV that were passed at General Convention this past summer. So it was helpful to get that kind of update and training. And it's always good to revisit something, even when you've got experience with it and you feel as if uh, you're competent and qualified to do that work. The other is that I was expected, and I did this voluntarily, expected to write a letter of apology to Dr. Singh and to her two sons for any hurt that I may have caused, and for continue uh, possibly continuing to leave them in a place of deep pain and lack of healing and reconciliation. Um, I've done that. That apology was accepted by the presiding bishop and his staff, appropriate Title IV staff, and that has been forwarded to Dr. Singh and to her two sons. So that matter is closed as well. So in regard to the Title IV matter in Wyoming with Paul Gordon Chandler, I was no longer the intake officer when a concern allegations against Bishop Chandler came forward. Rather, I was in a role that was emerging, where I was just wearing a pastoral support hat rather than gathering information to go into an intake report. I also was no longer a member of the reference panel, but rather acting on their behalf in pastoral support to Bishop Chandler, to his wife Lynn, to the complainant, um, to the person who was the recipient of um, the alleged inappropriate behavior, as well as to the leadership in the Diocese of Wyoming. Um, I want to point out that it was early in the church figuring out how to separate uh, the role of intake officer and the role of pastoral support. And we were still learning how to do that in this case. So what I had is in church language around Title IV, respondent, the bishop, respondent's family and others around the respondent, the complainant and complainant family, the individual that Bishop Chandler was alleged to have been in a relationship with, um, and then the leadership in the diocese that needed support and some guidance as they navigated, and that's a standing committee primarily, uh, as they navigated what it was like to keep the Diocese of Wyoming running in the absence of a bishop, because Bishop Chandler was placed on um, restriction on ministry and administrative leave. So my role was complicated to try to minister to various people within the system and within the particular issues around the complaint, some of which wouldn't necessarily trust me or anyone providing this kind of support or offering the support. It was also providing that support to other players within the system. We've since learned we've got to parcel out the pastoral support to multiple people so that there is more effective support and care for the various parties involved. But at that time, my role was to try to balance all of those. Um, Quickly, we got some pastoral support for the complainant and for the respondent, for Bishop Chandler and the person presenting the concerns. Um, Lynn Chandler did not express a real desire for me to reach out to her. Now, when I pushed it to be able to speak with her, I was told that it was too little, too late, and I regret that. That was the perception. Um, I also know that for me to have a role within the system, to work with her would have been likely very painful and unlikely to be particularly helpful to her, because I was working for the people who were bringing the case of the concern around the allegations against the bishop. So most of my work was with the standing committee and in helping them navigate particular issues that developed and to plan toward the future in the event that Bishop Chandler did not return to his office. Ultimately, what happened in the Title IV is an accord was signed between the presiding bishop, in this case, actually the presiding bishop designate. Bishop Curry, due to some medical issues, had withdrawn from the role, and Bishop Mary Gray Reeves was functioning in that role. So it was an accord or a settlement agreement between Bishop Chandler and the presiding bishop designate. That was done after church attorney and Bishop Chandler's attorney received information from investigation and report with significant information that informed all of them on their perspective on what was transpiring, what had transpired, and what the likely outcome was in the future. And that settlement agreement or accord that was reached was for Bishop Chandler to be deposed, which meant that he would no longer function as a bishop or have that status within the Episcopal Church. That effectively meant as well that the standing committee now held ecclesiastical authority, functioning in many of the roles of a bishop and needing to work with a bishop for those that specifically required a bishop. And I assisted the standing committee to make contact with Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shorey and for a negotiated relationship for her as bishop assisting in the diocese. She's been doing that for a number of months, and now there's an anticipation of moving from a very part-time bishop assisting into something closer to a full-time or perhaps full-time role with a bishop provisional. That's been my role. So once again, in this particular matter, it's given me some insights into the pain that has been experienced all around for everyone, the Chandlers, the complainant and family, and within the diocese. And so I bring those experiences in as a result of having had that pastoral support role. Thank you.